Everybody, welcome to our LawTech webinar. So we've just been doing all of our technical tests, and I think we are all on your screens. And so without further ado, first of all, a very warm welcome. As of today, as you know, this is a webinar with my guests, Gerard Frith, Lucia Alzalde Brutani, a Spanish and Italian surname, and Will Francis. And it's focusing on LawTech and the impacts, both positive and negative, within future talent. So I'm going to jump straight in and ask each of my guests for a very quick intro and a question. When you hear LawTech, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Efficiency, disruption, risk, or opportunity? So Gerard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. Thanks, Charlie. I'm Gerard Frith. I'm Director of Strategic Ventures at Taylor Wessing. I have a particular focus on AI in that role, and I've been building AI since the late 90s, but again, since about 2013, I've founded and exited 3 AI businesses across product and services. I advise a number of startups in the legal, AI and crypto space, and I guess that keeps me honest about what's marketing and what works in live. Generally, I'm a pragmatic optimist. So I guess to your question, all 4, efficiency pays for the disruption, risk is real, particularly if you're winging it, and the opportunity is to rewire delivery around data, not documents, in my mind. And if we don't, margin compression will do for all of us.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, moving on to Lucia.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Charlie. Thanks for having me. So I'm Director of Behavioral Innovation at Deckard. I'm a lawyer by trade. I practice law in the litigation and arbitration space for 20 years. I also work as general counsel of a multilateral organization for 5 years. And a few years ago, not a few years, like 5 years ago or so, I transitioned into an innovation role. And I have been very passionate about the behavioral aspects of innovation and how for innovation to happen and even technology adoption to happen, we need new mindsets and behaviors. And then I started a second career in behavioral science, and I hope to become a behavioral scientist at the end of this year. For me, that's a great question. For me, LawTech is first and foremost an opportunity. Of course, with any significant opportunity comes a degree of disruption and risk. So I guess for all of us who work in the innovation space, our job is to strike a balance between enthusiasm for innovation and technology with critical thinking around the future of our people and the growth of our organizations.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you and welcome, Lucia. And last but not least, Will.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Yeah, Will Francis. I'm an SVP for legal at BP. I'm not really. Well, I'm really a practicing lawyer. I lead a part of our oil and gas business in a number of different countries around the world, and the teams that support our refineries, and then all of our operations and upstream projects, and actually projects across everything we do in BP. But I have a real passion for innovation. I've been involved in trying to innovate here over the years, and I think that's why we got talking, Charlie. I know Lucia a little bit as well. I think the others have answered that question brilliantly, and I'm sure you'll want to move on. So I won't add to what they've said, other than to say that really I agree.
Yeah, great. Well, and so what a great panel to have, having both our in-house expertise, our AA technical expertise within legal, and Lucia, your both background of being a lawyer but still remaining within law practices. And so the rounded conversation, hopefully, we'll be looking at all aspects of how LawTech is impacting. And I guess it moves me on to the starting point, which is the current state. So what do we think, and Lucia, maybe I'll ask you first, what do you think is the current state of LawTech being adopted within law firms specifically?
So I think in law firms now we have more people than ever curious about AI technology and willing to try it. Does that translate into AI and tech adoption at scale, in the sense of technology widely and consistently adopted by most of our lawyers and embedded in our day-to-day workflows? The answer is no, and not yet, perhaps. And I think beyond the excitement about pilots and a few enthusiastic individuals and teams, we are still to see adoption at scale. And I think if you ask me about the reasons for that, is because I think there's a massive behavior change or behavior component of this. In relation to this, I think we are in a profession, and a risk-averse profession mostly, and changing habits and changing behaviors simply takes time. Habits take days to become automatic, from 66 days to 250 days to a habit to become something that you do without thinking. And at an organizational level, we can get like 15, 16, 20% of users among the innovators in our organizations or the early adopters, but then it takes time, months and even years, for the majority to follow. So it's an area where I think there's a lot of potential, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, and it's and speaking across a lot of our legal clients, I don't think you're not alone. That seems to be quite universal across law practices. Will, looking at in-house, and because you have a very very substantial legal team within BP. So, what's the current state of both within your teams, but the business adopting LawTech?
Yeah. Look, I think what we experience is or I experience is that there's more and more demand. The incredibly complex world we live in, it's only getting more complex. There's all sorts of challenges. It's super competitive, and there's a drive for productivity, of course, and outcomes. And I think technology is one of the ways that we address that challenge, and we're grappling with it, using it in many different ways across the company, trying to do that in a very responsible way. Of course, I think, as Gerard said at the start, there are risks, and so of course we're involved in that side of things too. So I think it's got huge potential, as we've discussed, and in terms of the LawTech from our perspective, I would say we're still fairly early on in experimenting with what's out there. Some areas, of course, have been using it for much longer. E-discovery, I think, is a great example, where if you wound the clock back, to when, say, I started for longer ago than I care to remember, actually as a litigator, and it was very manual, and technology was just starting to come in and kind of start to get involved. And then over that time, we've seen this huge proliferation of data. It's unimaginable, really, compared to what it was. You have to respond, and the technology has done. And what we do now in-house in that space is incredible. And it's all technology enabled, from machine learning, technology assisted reviews, and now you're seeing Gen AI come in and help with that, early case assessments, that kind of thing, privilege logs. So it's changing. And that's a good example of where it's so radically different to what it was, and it's still changing fast. But there's loads more to come, I think, Charlie, if that helps.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think, that's incredibly insightful when we're talking about the revolution, or the evolution is an incredible pace. And Gerard, being someone who's been in AI for an amount of time and beyond, outside of LawTech as well as in, and also working with tech companies trying to solve legal problems as much as working within a company like Taylor Wessing, what do you, anything to add for yourself when you're looking at the current state?
So I think it's an interesting stage of the market, because we've had the kind of initial excitement over AI. We've had a kind of a degree of pullback from that excitement. I think that we're at a kind of typical trying to move into the productive stage, away from the hype. So I think there's still a sense in which, I think the thing to understand, put it another way, chat function in AI is a demo, right? I mean, it shows you capability, but it doesn't get you to outcomes. It doesn't really kind of deliver cost reduction or risk management. You only get to that when you get to the workflow, and you can use some of these tools within it. So I think we're edging towards that stage where we have to really start thinking, which is a much more difficult phase of the market, where you have to start thinking about how you do things, changing how you do things, not just from a technology point of view, but from a process point of view and a skills point of view and a communications point of view. And once those things start to click, you can then make the tools effective. So, you can, for example, your AIs can plug into all of your, as a law firm, into all your intake information, so that your responses can be contextual. You can plug all of the kind of decades of document data that your firm or in-house department has built up and start making productive use of that. But it's hard, which is why people generally try and shortcut that and just put a tool in and hope for the best.
Yeah. So you're saying that really, and I'm getting all of these adverts on my social media channels, that if you're 40, you only use AI like Google or something like this,
Yeah,
and they're all everyone's trying to educate the world that AI is way beyond a replacement of basic chatbots and Google searches. But I guess thinking about the positive and risks of AI and LawTech specifically is there's always been, even outside of the legal industry, people have this fear that AI is about replacing jobs, replacing skills, whereas actually it's, in my personal opinion, very, very different. If you are someone who becomes a specialist and embrace AI, you're going to thrive. If you're someone who's only going to rely on it and not be a specialist in any sector, you'll struggle, and vice versa. Will, I've got to pass the question on to you. When you used e-discovery as a really nice example, but thinking internally, and you're really committed to looking at different solutions with technology enabling your internal teams. What positive impacts, or maybe even challenges, but what positive impacts are you seeing, or have you got that you can really showcase within the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would pick up on what you've said, really, that we are trying to do so much. We're trying to explore so many different opportunities, manage so many different challenges and risks simultaneously, and that challenge just grows. And so I think the opportunity here is to think about this in a different way and not just work more and more hours and take on more and more things, but think about the work in a smarter way. I mean, some of the tools that we've been experimenting with kind of take some of the heat out of people's days, enables them to just cut to the nub of it that much more quickly. And I don't think we've found a silver bullet by any means. And I think we'll find that different tools help you in different ways. I don't really believe the sort of this will come along and kind of revolutionize everything you do, or mean that you'll need 20% less people. I don't think that's really what's happening right now. But I think where you've got specific use cases, specific challenges, and then you can harness the technology in a more sophisticated way, like Gerard was saying, I think, to really help you in that space. That's where the value will come, as well as all the challenge, of course, of getting people to get excited about the change, manage it effectively, communicate it, and so on. So I think so far, like I said at the start, really, other than the big things, the kind of obvious things around e-discovery, disclosure, in the contracting space where you've seen sort of contract automation and tools like that already help, I think there's a lot still to come. But yeah, I think it's a very easy story to sell, isn't it? That you're going to have X percentage fewer, lawyers or accountants or whatever it is. And for sure, the jobs will change. I mean, I don't think it will be the same today, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time that it is today. I really don't. It's obviously going to change. But I think that's a really easy story. And the truth is, it's far more complex and interesting than that. And there's going to be loads of opportunities for people starting out now or in the middle of their careers to really, seize this, get involved in it. There's a whole area opening up around AI governance, right? You know, there's a whole new sort of chapter being written in the law around that, and so it's just heaps of opportunities. I really believe that. Does that get to your question, Charlie?
Yeah, no, thank you. Because as you say, it is about using us to get to the nub of the work, or to get us being able to add the most value within the realms of what our roles are. But obviously, a big challenge that people talk about is, well, how do you learn a trade or a skill if you're not doing the hours of work going into it? And the law profession is quite a great example of this. That young law associates are, the hours that they used to spend reading articles and the research was considered a training ground towards becoming better at their job, and that's going to be could be replaced with AI. What would be the future of those in-house talent or recruit young lawyers? And so, Lucia, with your behavioural science background, I imagine this must be something, working at Deckert and probably seeing that as a real consideration and balancing it with behavioural science. What's your view when looking at both the positive and the challenges?
So yeah, I think it's a historic moment in so many ways when we talk about AI. But if we think about our profession as lawyers, I think there's a big perhaps gap between the narrative AI is dramatically changing the way we work, which is a statement that I believe to be true. But at the same time, when you come to the office, or when we all go to the office, and I'm not saying just us, I'm saying the legal industry, law firms, legal teams within companies, in reality, we mostly continue to work mainly as we've worked before. When it comes to AI, we are still trying to understand how it works, how we should be making the most of it, how we should be teaching our different levels across the organization to use it, managing the risks. And I think that gap between the narrative and reality means that, it's something we have to work on. I mean, we need to equip people with, I wouldn't say just the skills, it's the understanding that for AI to benefit them, they need to change habits, daily habits. And for instance, you were mentioning more junior members of our teams, and it's absolutely true. The way junior members of the team are learning is changing. That is changing. And it's changing because unlike the more senior people like us, they don't go to the library to grab a book and photocopy it and highlight it with a highlighter. They now learn mainly through devices. And, instead of fighting that or questioning that or kind of doubting that they are not learning enough, I think we should be embracing the fact that these people are still learning, only differently. And I think a big space that mixes technology with behavioral science and change is, how can we make these junior members of the teams learn from AI? And for instance, something that I'm really interested in researching, but also in some projects we have in-house, is how can we develop tools that not just deliver a service or a task or whatever benefit to the teams, how can we use the same tool to teach junior members of the teams the tricks of the trade? Because these tools that, especially those we develop in-house, that are very tailor-made, should be capturing our most important asset, which is our knowledge. How can we use AI to capture that knowledge, synthesize it, package it, and deliver it to the more junior members of the team? So that's space that, for me is fascinating. And I don't know if I answered your question, Charlie, but I really like your focus on the junior members of the team, and how as seniors, members of teams, we should be giving people air cover to learn in new ways, or to explore how to learn in new ways, and how to make the most of AI. Because I believe, for instance, that AI is, I mean, the biggest value from AI, we are going to get it from bottom-up change.
Yeah.
So how can we give people the empowerment to question us and show us the way, really?
Yeah, I mean, Lucia, I love that. Charlie, I've been thinking about this quite a lot, and I mean, we don't hire, fresh graduates into the legal function here. We hire mature hires, but I've been thinking about, if I think back to my early days, you could say some of the hours and weeks and months that I spent in data rooms. It gave me some sort of appreciation of the attention to detail and so on. But I reckon you could mount a very effective counter argument that if I'd been able to spend those 80% of that time doing other things higher up the value chain, I would have developed way faster and been more effective. Again, I think it's a really easy thing to kind of go, oh, all the old methods are kind of defunct, and they were good because look, you've got good people out at the end of it. But actually, again, I go back to that opportunity. I think there's massive potential there. It does take a bit of a reimagining, and so too, Lucia, we've seen, like, we've rolled Copilot out, not as a LawTech product, of course, but just sort of across the organization. And the best ideas, the best, most innovative use of that technology is coming from the people who are using it the most, who typically, and I'm generalizing, but tend to be the more junior people. And it's remarkable how people are beginning to think to use it. And it's so much more than I would have ever thought of. So once again, it's a kind of complex thing, I think, but huge potential there too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, thank you, Will, because seeing it both in-house but also in the legal firms it's the same, isn't it? There's opportunities that come from it. But Gerard, I'm interested because you obviously have a finger on the pulse of young entrepreneurs who are trying to solve problems and look at LawTech in a different lens and want to understand the real challenges. So when you look at it, what do you see as the real opportunities, but any challenges or risks?
Well, I think let's start with the challenges and risks, because in a way they're easier, and I think we probably mostly know what they are. We've touched on cultural issues, and I think they're it's easy to kind of badge things like that as aversion to change, and of course it is a risk-averse industry. But I think the other side to it is that there is a real sense amongst lawyers of the craft of law, and it's an important thing to recognise the attachment which we all have to the craft that we practice. For me, it's a different craft, but I have a personal identification with that. And so when you start moving people's cheese, to quote the old kind of change handbook, they don't like it. Nobody likes it because it creates insecurity. So there are barriers. There's a degree to which, therefore, you have to meet people where they are. But given the power of the forces of change, and I think AI is a unique technology in that it's not going to kind of slightly change the way that we do things or automate or speed some of the things we do. I think it is probably a fundamental reimagining. It will therefore take quite a lot of energy, quite a lot of engagement, and it won't necessarily be quick. And I think importantly, it probably won't come from the large institutional incumbents. It will be driven by the nimble players who have much less institutional memory, much less installed cost base, and the other barriers to change. And so those things will be a shock to the industry as they occur, and some will respond quickly and will be able to join that leading rank of innovators, and probably some won't. So I would expect that we see significant change along the way. I think skills is a significant aspect here, and it's both obviously a barrier to adoption, but also a considerably important thing to consider of as an enabler. So we need new people coming into the industry. And if I look at, it's interesting when you look at startups in the legal space, many of them are ambitious associates who have encountered a problem in their own work, probably working in-house or within a law firm, but an awful lot of them aren't. And I think, that influx from outside of the industry is incredibly important and powerful change that's happening. People coming in with the ability to, decompose processes, to understand how you orchestrate work, knowledge work, say through an organisation, and they may be coming from a consulting background, an accounting background, or just people who have been involved at the fringes of those and seen an opportunity. So I think we probably need more of that. We need more kind of alternative law organisations driven by people who are not necessarily from the industry, in order for that to really hit home. And there's changes across the board. There's things like outcome price thinking will make quite a significant difference to the way that the industry operates as well. And pricing and the economics, to my mind, always drive innovation.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. When there's that concern of the traditional pricing models and law firms being traditionally valued on the hours that they will commit to a client to solve a problem, and if AI is going to dramatically reduce the number of hours needed, does that mean it's reducing the value of the law firm? I would question not, because it's those embracing it. But yeah, Gerard.
But yes, it does require that embracing, as you say, because in a steady state model, it actually does change and reduce the value of a law firm in many ways. If you respond to that and you reimagine your value and you focus on where it truly is, then yes, you have a great opportunity to play and drive new revenues and build new kinds of relationships with clients.
And following that thread around new roles, and especially encouraging people from outside of a legal background into the industry, whether to be able to bring that diversity of thought. Lucia, how open do you think law firms in general are to sort of pushing that? Well, what does a new talent look like? Who are we going to start hiring? Legal engineers, AI specialists? Are we going to actually, look at more than 10% of our budget being put into technology and a technology strategy? What do you see when you're thinking about talent coming into the sector?
Yes, I think that's something. It's a great question, because as with everything we are trying to solve in relation to AI, talent is probably one of the most important areas, because we are who we have in our organizations. And I would say that I in my view, based on my experience and what I'm seeing, not just in a decade, but also in peer firms, our competitors and the industry, is that I believe that two highlights or two things I've seen. One is now more important than ever, we need to develop in our lawyers and business professionals divergent thinking, creativity, idea generation, the basics of idea adoption, strategic thinking, in a way, skills that allow people to see the potential in technology. Right now, we don't have the answers. We don't, even people like us who work in this space, we don't have the answers. What we need is as many people as we possibly can thinking creatively, how can we make use of this technology? So if in the past there were some skepticism within the industry about innovation programs, idea generation programs, creative thinking programs, now is the time where those programs should be doubled down and should be, make even more important, because those are the environments where ideas around AI or around anything else thrive. So I think in terms of our own lawyers or business professionals, we need to equip them with these new skills. And even people who come to work with us, people who graduate from university, they don't get that at law school, at least not yet, at least not at scale. So in a way, our organizations have this mandate to provide people with the environment and the skills to be more creative thinkers and problem solvers. Because at school, you know, we learn that for a problem, there is this solution. We are very much linear thinkers. For innovation and AI and technology, we need the opposite. We need divergent thinking. And the second thing I've seen, or the second phenomenon I would like to highlight, is that now more important than ever, we need to have lawyers work side by side with AI designers, UX designers, developers, data scientists. I'm not so sure we as lawyers should be, asked to be data scientists and UX designers and, the best at technology. We should be asked to work side by side and in close collaboration with people that in the past we would dismiss as, oh, these people that have nothing to do with us. So if I'm a lawyer, why am I required to work with a data scientist? Well, now you should be working side by side with a data scientist, because these people have an understanding of data, and data these days is power and is money and is many things. So, I think the second topic, or the second big challenge, or area of opportunity for us, is how can we make lawyers work closer with people from other disciplines. And I completely agree with Gerard in the sense that we should be bringing outside talent, inspiration from other industries that do things better than we do. I mean, and this is something that I think I discussed this with Will when we met, but when we have a conversation, like law firms, we tend to look at what other law firms are doing. We tend to compare all the time. I'm doing this. What are my competitors doing? And perhaps a much smarter question would be for us to think, what are other industries or other companies that are great at growth, profit generation, client service? What are they doing that we should be incorporating in law? So I think those are the two: building new skills on creativity and divergent thinking, and also improving collaboration with other fields, I think are my main two predictors of what should happen sooner rather than later for us to embrace AI in a much cleverer way.
Yeah, no, well, thank you, Sue, because that's looking at it with that sort of innovation and willingness to bring people in. We've been working with a number of clients talking about, well, what will attract the very best engineers to our firms, because there's a perception that a law firm, are we really going to be able to attract data science, data engineers, people with innovative thinking? And the thing that I keep going back to is I relate it to the banking sector 5 or 10 years ago, and this was pre-AI really, but the banking sector had a perception of not being embracing technology, and then all of a sudden cloud technology became robust and people were able to start trusting it, that the banks came on the bandwagon. And now innovation hubs within the banking sector are some of the most exciting places for technologists to work. And I look at the legal sector as the next banking sector, where there's a lot to not fix necessarily, but if you want unscripted, untapped, greenfield problems to solve using technology, it's the new era, and it's enabled because of AI. So I look at it as a very, very exciting place. If partners, the business, the FDs understand the value it can bring, and to be leading it rather than following it. And Will, I thought, knowing that because of BP being the size it is, I imagine you also have to use external counsel as well as for support on certain things. And so, putting your client hat on, what would you be looking for? If a law firm, your partners, people that you will engage, how important is it that they can show you that they're using latest technology, or at least they've got an understanding of it for you to sort of be able to want to invest or hire them?
Yeah, no, we use, of course, but some of our work we will always need to work with external counsel, so that's definitely a part of what we do. And I think their technology plan, how our partners are using technologies, is sort of increasingly important, and we look at it as one of the many different things you look at when you're kind of selecting the right person to work with. And it is then a collaboration. It's very much a partnership when you're working together. Often it's on the biggest, most complex things we do, so they tend to run for some of them will run for weeks, months, possibly even years. So you're working in really close collaboration with lawyers in private practice. So yeah, we absolutely expect them to be using technology. We're really interested to hear how it's being used, both on a sort of matter by matter basis, so on the case or the transaction or the issue you're working on, for sure, but also just more generally, and understanding what they're seeing, and we have some great conversations, very open to sharing the things they've done that have worked, the things they haven't. So it's one of the sources that we use to learn what we might do in-house, as well as on a matter by matter basis. I think there's massive opportunity. You were kind of touching on it before, and Gerard was as well, I think, in those pricing models and what could the future really hold there. I personally believe, and I've said this to quite a few people over time, that there's a massive opportunity there, because actually things haven't changed that much in terms of the way that things are structured, and they have a bit, things have evolved a bit, but I think there's huge potential for people to reimagine how that relationship can work, what the pricing models are, and how that collaboration can be built to another level. And all these people, when you go, occasionally I'll go to a conference, one of these sort of meetups of different sort of legal law tech, and it is striking to me, because I don't live day in day in this space, but over time it's striking to me the diversity and quality that is really starting to see there. And as Gerard was saying, it's definitely people coming from outside of the law. And that is, I agree, that influx is going to be really, really interesting. And if I was running a law firm, I would for sure be thinking about, who do I need to hire? Who are the people that are really going to help me get a march on my competitors here, and think differently? And that may very well be people that come from a different industry, who've already experimented a bit more than we have.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that from both the client perspective, but also from what you're seeing as within the sector. And so, Gerard, thinking about how do we make LawTech then a positive force when we're understanding, we've spoken a lot about needing to change mindsets, needing to change concepts, and how, as Lucia said, actually focusing on the young talent coming in, and how that needs to have a different type of learning mentality, and as Will said about the best ideas come from those who are using it. Gerard, with your mindset looking at LawTech being an enabler, and I imagine within both Taylor Wessing, but also within many of your other interests, you've had to help educate, maybe. What's your thoughts on how do we make LawTech see as an enabler, not a threat?
So, well, I mean, it's such an interesting question. So thank you. I think firstly, you have to take quite a subtle view of the world, because it's very easy to approach questions like this from the old cliches. The law firms, price tradition, they're kind of change averse, and like any cliche, they're to some extent true, but you have to probe underneath them and really understand what's behind it. So you might say about law firms, they price tradition. Well, they would. It's worked for a very, very long time, and we do tend to stick with the things that work. A lot of this, and a lot of the education piece, I think, is going back to what we said previously, is about learning from other industries and other professions in particular.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it easier. That change has worked, and the tech-driven change has worked in particular in other industries, then it makes, I think, more apt to pay attention, because we can see more of an analogy between our world and the world that did change. Audit is not an incredibly close domain, but it has similarities to legal practice. And to take a really big example, I mean, the way that auditors had to engage with ERP systems, over time, and the flip from kind of flip from ledgers to ERP was significant. It was unavoidable, and you saw a whole class of different groups in there. Some responded very quickly to the change and did very well. Others were a lot slower and weren't successful, and some fell away as a result. There's a really interesting example from medicine at the moment, which is that AI, for example, has been applied to medical diagnosis a lot, and everyone thinks there is probably quite a good opportunity there. There's some really interesting research which is showing that if you get just a LLM on its own, large language model on its own, to diagnose a disease based on the facts of the case, versus a doctor working with an LLM, the LLM on its own does better. Now, that's really, really counterintuitive. It kind of argues against some of the things that we classically say. It's like, well, AI is great, you need a human in the loop. But I think this is an example of what I mean. You have to dig down quite a lot to understand why that's happening. And it's actually happening not because the LLM is better at diagnosis, it's because the partnership between doctors and LLMs hasn't been properly understood. And so there tends to be arguments between doctors and LLMs, and in those instances, the doctors naturally overrule, without necessarily exploring why the LLM is coming to some of its conclusions. So I think, all of this points that you have to go down into quite a lot of detail sometimes and really prize apart the problem that you're trying to solve with a lot of humility. Because I think that we do need to rethink the way that we do things, and it's much more complex than AI is useful. We just need a human in the loop to make sure it doesn't do daft things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you. I think again, the points being raised are so apt when we're talking about having to try and evolve everyone's thinking. But it's I did a podcast with another person that a lot of you know, Jennifer Swallow, who is a LawTech thought leader in regards to how the regulations will change. And she said something along the lines of, what you put in is what you get out. If you put nothing in, you'll get nothing out. So if you're not working with AI, exactly as you just said, Gerard, it's not about human and AI working together. It's about really going deep into it to challenge the models, to challenge the thinking, and use it as a way more than a sparring partner, but something to challenge your thinking. That's when people are moving from using it like Google to actually embracing the future of it. And it sounds like there's cases across all three. Well, look, time has flown by. I mean, we could talk about this for another another few hours, I feel. So I'm going to do a closing little summary of just asking you each, in one sentence, what's your hope for the future of LawTech and the next generation of legal talent? So, Will, I will start with you.
Well, I hope that people continue to embrace it, and that in this world where we're seeing a lot of threat and risk from technology in general, that the legal profession, that the next generation of lawyers can really harness it, for good, and counter that, really.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Lucia.
I'm with Will. I think my hope is that on the one hand, the more senior lawyers in our organizations are brave enough to fundamentally change how they perceive the value of lawyers to be, embrace different ways of seeing at how we do things, and embrace disruption and discomfort and uncertainty. And at the same time, I hope the more junior members of our firms embrace the opportunity they have right now to promote change and in a way challenge hierarchies as much as they possibly can, and challenge how we the traditional paradigms of how we work, how we do things in our organizations, and just take a leap of faith in a way, and yeah, you use that opportunity to promote change. This is the time where they can do things differently, and they can help us see things differently. So I hope they do that as well.
Fantastic. And Gerard, one thing for you.
Well, I mean, I think Lucia put it brilliantly there, and Will too. I think it's probably a couple of things. It's people's roles become more interesting and more engaging. That we move away from those hundreds of hours spent in the data center, as Will mentioned earlier, and the very broadly we expand access to justice through this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's a great one, isn't it? It really does level the playing field, as we said earlier, but also, giving access to justice. So, well, thank you very, very much. Time has flown by, so it's for me to say a massive thank you. Will, Lucia, Gerard, thank you so much for being guests on our LawTech webinar.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone who has joined, listened on the webinar. The recording will also be shared across our social media channels, so it'll be used for anyone following up who has not had a chance to listen to this. But for now, a big thank you for everyone listening, and one more time, a thank you to all our guests. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye.